I'm on the graveyard shift, everybody. I'll try my best to keep an eye on the comments, but I am horrendously bad at multitasking. As you guys know, the science doesn't support that very well. And so it's always weird, right? Because I'm sitting in my apartment here talking to myself like a complete stranger. But today I've got the task of talking a little bit about, I suppose, how technology supports learner well-being. I know you're coming off quite an interesting panel discussion about a lot of different aspects of the new world of work, including well-being. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. And I suppose really where I want to come from is I want to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about what I'm talking about when I'm talking about well-being, right? So let's firstly qualify what well-being is. And then I want to talk a little bit about the kind of return on investment and the why, because I still think there's a big gap there. And then I'm going to reach in and talk a little bit about kind of the I suppose the skeleton of the framework, and particularly the behavioural change aspects, and how we use technology and how technology in general can support well-being. So bear with me. We've got about 23 minutes to go. You're nearly out the gap, and yeah, it's nearly the end of the day, and I know you've had a good day. If anybody does have any questions, or if I'm not being clear on anything, just throw them into the chat. I'd be more than happy to keep an eye on them and try answer them as I go as well. Super. So let's talk a little bit about well-being and what we're talking about. Well, I'm kind of hoping that in a post-COVID world, we have moved past the fruit in the canteen and the yoga in the classroom or in whatever room you're in. And I'd like to hope and think that when we talk today and we think about well-being, we really think about it in a broader way, right? Well-being, when I think about it as an employee or an employer, or if you're working in a classroom or an educational perspective, it's what is it everything that I need to come and to perform at my best. And that really is performing at my best, both in my home life as well as my work life or my student life. So you'll see all the obvious stuff up there, like things like nourishment, movement, and all of that kind of good stuff. I know earlier you guys were talking a lot about mindfulness, and you were talking about growth mindset and all that kind of great stuff. And we love Carol and all of that. But what we sometimes forget about when we think about well-being is actually about the quality of the relationships you're in, be that at home or at work. That's the caliber or the quality of leadership we experience, and our connection to the world around us, and the connection to our community, and, things beyond ourselves. So today, every time when I talk about well-being, I'm talking about all of those things. And for most people that are sitting there thinking, well, how do I get people to perform, whether it's in an educational or in a work environment, to the best of their ability? The way you can do that is by combining both a great work or educational environment as well as great well-being. Because if you think about it, even if I come to work or education and I'm looking after my mindset and I'm eating well and I'm thinking well and I have love in my life and I can pay my bills and all of that good stuff, if I'm actually not in an environment that supports that, if I've got poor leadership, poor relationships, I'm not happy in my job, I can't do my job, I don't have the tools to do my job, then I can never high perform. And conversely, the opposite. If I have the greatest working or learning environment in the world, but my well-being isn't as good as it can be, I can never perform at the best of my abilities or anywhere near that. So that's really the why of well-being. Why does that actually even matter to us? So let's talk a little bit about the real cost of it. I've kind of got to the point where, if I be honest with you, sometimes I almost get a bit fed up of updating these figures, because it's kind of depressing. They're not getting better, guys. I'm a long time doing this. I'm at least 5 years. Like, literally, I obsess about well-being at work. That's pretty much all I do all day long, which you might say, maybe I should get a life. Maybe I should. But you can see here what the stats are telling us. You can see how distracted people are. The average employee picking up their phone 150 times a day. 40% of people in the US believe it is impossible to have both a successful home and work life. 60% of people saying, I can't bring all of me to work. And the stats, to be honest, for Ireland really aren't any better. So from that perspective, I'm just going to leave that. And the slides are there and they can be sent out so you guys can read them at your leisure. Again, if I look at the one of the more recent IBEC, and you guys, again, from Ireland will see this every year, is that 50% of employees are literally saying, I would leave my employer if they don't care about my well-being. So on one hand, well-being matters from a performance perspective and a human perspective. We see the incredible loss to business when it's not there. Employees really care about it. And then I'm going to finish you off now on the ROI of well-being, as if you weren't probably already convinced enough. And we talk about, yeah, and I do kind of put an eye roll in here, because if sometimes I just get really sick of saying the same things over and over, and I get frustrated, if I be honest. And I'm like, why can't I get my point across better? Or why can't I help people understand why this stuff matters more? But actually, I think it's like everything. It's the gap between understanding something and doing something about it, right? So what is the ROI of well-being? We know there is so much science there around competitive advantage, innovation, high performance. But on the converse side, you can see all the stats are saying performance and productivity are still on the decline. We know it adds to both life engagement, as in my ability to engage with all aspects of my life, and my employment. We know all the science about readiness to work and being part of stuff and play and all that. And that's great. But there's one piece of research I particularly love, if I be honest, because I think it wraps all of that up in one go, which is it's a few years ago now, but it was a longitudinal study. And I think what I like about that is a lot of time when you look at research in this space, it can be very like, we did one survey, we did a pulse survey, but this survey literally looked over 7 years. And what they did was they took the S&P index, and they took within that the 45 companies that scored the highest on health and well-being as an employer. And what they did was they looked at their performance over that 7-year period. And what they found was that they outperformed the rest of the companies on the S&P index, right? And so if you're on the S&P, you're already doing pretty well, right? You're not a shoddy company. And the S&P is pretty well known. And those companies outperformed, those 45 companies outperformed all the rest by 235%. So if that doesn't tell you there is a solid ROI, or at least there's something for companies to look at when they talk about well-being, I don't know what would. And the reason I start there is that for me is the most important place to start before we even talk about the why, before we talk about how technology supports. So I think that kind of takes me on to the next step of my thoughts around well-being, which is there really isn't a lack of well-being for a lack of content. I know there was a lot of discussion today talking about mindfulness and psychological safety and all that kind of great stuff. But none of these are topics that if you had an ounce of interest in, you couldn't Google and find some absolutely top-notch content on the interweb about in the morning. And I'm sure that's probably the same for nearly every topic that we've talked about over the 2 days of Learnovation. But if there isn't a lack of, if we have a serious lack of well-being, which all the research and the data shows us we have, and it's not from a lack of content, what is it from? And we've come to the inalienable truth for any of us that work in this area and literally study it day to day, is that there is a lack of well-being because behavioral change is really, really bloody hard. And it's hard in everything, not just well-being. Now, we know any health-related changes or health, and when I say health, I'm talking the very general sense of it, behavioral change is even harder again. So that brings us on to kind of, I suppose, what I wanted to focus on, which is how can technology really uniquely impact that? I suppose I've grown up in tech and in the tech industry. And listen, and rightly so, tech gets a lot of backlash. It gets a lot of hammering, and it deserves a lot of it too. But there are so many ways that technology can really uniquely impact well-being beyond any of the offline stuff we do. And that's not to say there's not a role for that, right? I would never be that person that would say it's something or the other, but there are things that it can really uniquely do. And I think that the first thing that technology can really, really help us with is creating community around people. We know, again, all the research that exists there says is that for real habit change to take part or to take place, that happens when the person trying to make the change is in a supported environment, right? We know that people will do things beyond themselves when part of a group. If anybody that's sitting here is thinking about it, think about, when you played, I don't know, tennis in a club or badminton or on a football team, whatever it was, think about the nights you didn't want to go training. Then think about the fact that you'd let the rest of your team down. Think about the days when maybe you didn't play so well and you might have got discouraged, and think about the support from your team. And technology has a really beautiful way of doing that. The second thing we can do is we can deliver a level of personalization with technology and a relevance to the learner that is very, very hard to replicate offline, or at least in any scalable way offline. The third thing, and it's kind of aligned to that personalization and that relevance, is the concept and what we can do with tech, which is we can literally have it on demand. And we hear this all the time, like in the flow of work, in the flow of whatever you're doing. And that for any of us, when we think about real behavioral change, so if we think about what we're trying to do with learning, is we're trying to take it from a point of saying there is a gap or a deficiency or something someone wants to get after, through to any kind of level of education or learning that needs to take place, and right through into the action. And then from the action to the habit, right? To the creation of the habit off the back end of it. Again, I know I'm taking more complex science and I'm just talking in generalities, but just for the sake, let's just keep on that flow. So think about it like how exciting it is that for now you can have effectively your learning in your pocket. You can have your community in your pocket. You can have your accountability in your pocket. And that really drives that fourth point, that real meaningful behavior change, where now as a learner, and particularly on the well-being side, I can understand my own well-being real time, because that's changing all the time, right? It's not like I've learned a skill and therefore I have it forever. You know, I've learned to drive and in 5 years' time, I'll still have to learn to drive and I won't have to learn again. The reality with well-being is, depending on where we're at, we may need to go back and look at things again or revisit them. And so that idea of really being able to get from the data and the understanding my why of something right through to whatever knowledge I need to acquire or reacquire or reacquaint myself with, right through to the behavior. And then, you know, the off the back of it, which is number 7, which I'm talking about with these real-time insights. But then it's the nudges, it's the reminders. Hey, you said this was important to you. Can you keep that up? Can we gamify that? Can we help incentivize you to keep that great behavior up? And then number 5 is, you know, I think, and I mean, I'm not saying again, these things can't happen offline. Of course they can, but you really get a chance to bring the fun, to bring the novelty, to bring something new and fresh and exciting. And I think that for most of us, we know that, right? People want to do stuff that's fun. I want to do stuff that's fun. The other thing I would kind of say about tech, and again, like not being preachy, it's not like tech is the only way or tech is the answer or tech is perfect. It's not. But I think that sometimes the thing that really can be very strong sometimes with technology around well-being, and it's weird because a lot of the time I get pushback where people are like, well, you know, you're talking about well-being, Michelle, and then you're putting something on someone's phone. And I think that's a fair challenge, right? Like, so even I know for us, we are very reticent about how we build our product to not distract people and to not whatever, right? So I accept there's tensions in these things, but there is a huge role that anonymity plays in technology, which we know on one side, people will be very critical when they think about things like social media and stuff like that. But when you think about, say, for example, I have a health concern, a health challenge. Just say, for example, I was like, I'm anxious. I don't want to tell people about it. I'm not comfortable. What technology can do is actually allow people into conversations about stuff. It can allow them to access to things. It can allow them to participate in things that they may not do face to face, or they may not have a comfort level around. So I guess all I'm trying to pull out is the tensions here to say that actually there's a good part to that too. And then finally, and I think some of you guys were alluding to it in the panel before the break, was, you know, the role that technology plays in accessibility, accepting that you have to have Wi-Fi and access to the technology. So we'll put that to one side. But, you know, the reality is that technology can bring in all kinds of marginalized groups. And I'm not just talking about, say, someone with a disability or someone with, you know, an impairment, but I'm actually talking in a more general sense. It can bring all of us into the conversation. You know, for anybody who's even, say, worked remotely, or well, whichever he has been now, anybody who's worked in a distributed fashion, technology is a great way to bring people into a conversation that might not have been before. It's a great way from people from different geographies, from different groups, from different diverse groups, whatever it is. And there's certainly a relatability that goes with that. So if I think again about the flow on then, so as you build and you're trying to really reinforce well-being and you're really trying to support it through technology, I think that there's kind of three things that I would really, really call out. And they can be so naturally built in from a technological perspective, which is, what are those basic needs that really enhance our intrinsic motivations, right? Because we all know this, right? You guys on the call will know things like self-determination theory better than I can ever talk to it, right? We know there's the extrinsic stuff, right? People will do stuff for a goal. I want to lose weight. I want to run a faster 5K. I want to get the promotion at work, whatever it is. But we know that the majority of people that will stick long-term to something and really bring about long-term behavioral change, we know that we want to play up on their intrinsic motivation, right? That idea of doing something for the joy of it. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the three basic psychological needs that we know we need to play to is, number one, have I autonomy? Do I have a sense of ownership and choice about what I get to do? And I think when we think about maybe some of our more traditional learning methods, we may have had less of that. Maybe not. Competence. Do I feel capable that I've actually got a chance of meeting the needs of this, of actually achieving this, of doing it? And then relatedness, the degree to which I feel connected to and valued by the others around me in my world and whoever is important to me. And I kind of tie that together then when I think about creating lasting behavioral change from a technology perspective. And there's 4 areas that I would say we would really focus in on, because we know that they bring the greatest levels of reward, or the greatest levels of commitment, should I say. And the first one is that, can we help users from a technology perspective support meaningful choices? And by that, if you think about it, right, if we think about people who are almost autonomously motivated, where does that come from? It comes from, the reasons for their behavior being tied to either their values, their goals, or their identity. And that's effectively what you or I would call their why. So we get to support meaningful choices by helping them select behaviors, or to get after behaviors that are really tied to their why. And we know, I think I told you this earlier, again, I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know. Health or health-related changes are hard. So what we also know from the research is that the more that a user reflects on their why, the greater the chance, or the greater the likelihood is that they will have longer term success and stick with them. So for us, from a technology perspective, we get the opportunity throughout the process to, have you lost sound? Sorry, I hope not. Somebody can ping me if nobody else has lost sound. So what we can say is that throughout the process, what we want to do is to continually remind the user of their why, and point to that. And like, we know those points of disengagement are when any learner churns, right? So the second thing then is, how can we make those good, meaningful choices easy? So, we all know that knowing your why is great, but putting it into action is much harder. So supporting the easy to do things, making behaviors that users want to change easy, is usually by breaking them down into, and again, nothing earth-shattering about this, right? Breaking them down into the most manageable, without losing the essence of this, but the most manageable element or part. And so we've learned that instead of, in the past, say, giving somebody, a 6-month journey, a 1-year journey, it's too long. Break it down into the elements of that and let people feel like, I've actually, back to the last slide, I have a chance of actually succeeding. I have competence at this. And what we really want to do is decrease the friction between them getting after these good behaviors. Decrease anywhere that is going to stop a user doing something, getting after something, keeping after something. So ways you can do that from a technology perspective is, for example, like by reducing the number of choices. Gone are the days when you'd say, here's 1,000 things to do. We know what you need. You've told us that here. Here's 3 things we think would be of interest to you. Would you like to do them? Providing them with rationale. Hey, 70% of people who say they have a similar objective as you or whatever, say this was helpful to them, you might be interested in it. And again, at all points, for example, giving people what we call the emergency exit, giving them a chance to say, look, is this too much for you right now? Do you want to press pause? Do you want to put it on hold? Do you want to come back to it later? Because the more we push people into a funnel where they feel like they've no way out, the more likely they will be to quit. And again, it's the obvious thing we've already talked about, is like avoiding goal dilution, avoiding this idea of like, I'm getting after 75 different things and then I don't achieve any of them, right? Think about most of us come January when we're like, we're going to eat better, we're going to exercise more, we're going to be nicer to our partners, we're going to save money. And then come like the 12th of February, you're having a bottle of wine, eating a takeaway, trying to remember back what you even said you were going to do in January. So keep things simple. We know that people by and large cannot, but the science shows us that for the most success, people are better off getting after one chunked down behavioral change at a time. And then again, personalizing the experience. Again, we talked a little bit about this, but like letting users make the app their app, or letting users make the technology, their names, their choices, their behaviors they want to get after, or things they want to learn about. Letting individuals, and for us it's individuals and teams, select what journey they want to go on, how much time they want to spend on it. If they want reminders, when they want them. If they want to spend time, how much. If they want notifications, when do they want notifications? And really, I suppose, and that's again the beauty with the analytics, and you can do that super easily with most technologies nowadays, particularly a lot of the open source ones, because you can buy in analytics tools from lots of places, is you can then start to tailor content to those users' journeys and let them select what is of interest to them, and let them select what habit changes they want to get after. And because we know straight away they're going to be more engaged. And then finally, I know it's kind of simple, but we all like to do it. We all want to do stuff that's fun. And if fun, and fun in itself, right, is healthy, right? So, we know, and all the research shows us, and our own data and analytics shows us, that engagement is always higher when people have joy in the process rather than just getting after the thing, right? So that I wanted to kind of take you on to the last and the final part, the final part was I want to kind of talk to you about this in practice, right? Like, how have I seen this work in practice? And for many of you who know me, I come from an L&D background, well, kind of a more HRE than L&D. I wouldn't be in no way as experienced as most people on this call in just L&D. But, I do sometimes think about how I might have thought about something in my old world versus my new world, And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a client of ours who are a tech company. They've about under 2,000 employees, and they really care about them. They're very sweet. They've obviously been working hybrid like most people have been over the last year, or starting to transition back, or they've been working remote, starting to transition back to hybrid. They have a lot of night shift stuff happening. And they were feeling, the reality, the negative effects, right? Because it's very, very difficult, no matter how well balanced you are. And they were starting to see an impact, personally and professionally for their employees, right? It wasn't like, oh God, productivity's down, let's intervene. It was actually like, people don't feel as excited. People are a bit their morale is a bit low, and people aren't having as good a time at home at work. Can't speak, sorry. So we were talking to them about it, and they're obviously looking at our product, and that was great. And I want to talk to you about one element of what's in our product that we felt would really, really support them. And that was really, we were like, okay, let's do something specific. Will we have something specific there around people who are in, this kind of night shift world? And it's called a night owl program. It's just part of, it's only one of many things we do. And if I think about my old world, and again, this is not a critique, there is no either or, there's no only way or better way. There's just ways, and it's always about us figuring out what is right in each circumstance. So please, I want to be open and honest about that. But I think in my old world, I would have thought a lot about, okay, what are all the elements that would help a night owl improve their well-being in that space? And our teams, and that's, very, very seasoned teams, they kind of pulled together, and I've just given you a rough idea of some of the stuff that would be in if we had a traditional course, everything about sleep and your food and your mood and relationships and your routines, right? So that seems like a great kind of course, quote unquote, from that side. And then what we did is we start to look, and we always start to say, well, where can technology amplify that? So taking the same elements, and that's really, I think, where this has come together for our client. So the first thing I would say is, we always start with insights, right? So we would rather a user or a team or a company select something they want to do. We would never impose it on them. So as you can see here on the insight side, the feedback from this came from, we've a team check-in feature where the team is checking in. They're looking at their sentiment, what wasn't so good in the past month, what was blocking them, what was holding them back, and then how are they feeling about that month ahead, right? So you have a good sense of where they've come from, where they're going to, keeping an eye on time. And then we looked at all and then what we do is they bring it into a team talk where they actually talk out, hey, look at our analytics, look at what does that say? What might we, if we want to do anything, do off the back of it? And that's where this stuff has come from, is it's come from people going, hey, this isn't working for us. We need to do it differently. Then into the action phase then, where they go into a team path, they're looking at all their interactive elements. So they're seeing all their content, all the great stuff that you would expect there. But we're also tapping into their why. Tell us why you want to do this, John or Mary or whoever, tapping into all those intrinsic motivations. And then what we can do is we can put some fun gamification in there, challenge them a little bit, enthuse them a little bit, give them some nudges and reminders. Hey, Mary, you said this was important. Is it still important? And then surround them in a community where they can share photos, encourage each other, send each other messages, tell each other about great content. And then off the back of it, then you get to measure, you get to see how did it work out. And I'll show you a little bit about how it worked out. So here's we should turn my notifications off now. Sorry. So here's the data. Here's what the users found, right? This is not us. This is what the users found. You can see pre-program, 56% finding it difficult to sleep. Post-program, 93% are saying, hey, I've got now better habits about how I sleep. 35% saying my eating habits are affecting it. Post it, 97% saying I have better eating habits now. And again, and this isn't just about doing something one and done. The beauty of the gamification, the beauty of technology is you can keep that habit and then habit stack, right? And encourage them more, boost that in more. 46% saying, hey, my work and my environment is affecting my sleep. Afterwards, 98% saying I understand my environment and the effects and I can do something about it. 40%, interestingly, before saying that whole thing is having an effect and I'm not happy with my work-life balance. Afterwards, 96% saying, actually, that's helped me. And I think a lot of the time that's the thing, right? Something that seems really big, I'm really unhappy about my work-life balance, can actually be something smaller, but exacerbated over time. And finally, what I wanted to do was show you the human beings behind that, the users, and what the users actually think. And I think that some things that really jumped out to me were, something like when you see the very human piece of somebody saying, actually, this is like my personal coach. So that's back to the personalization we talked about. I can now take care of my physical and mental health. It's not about work or life. It's about both. And I love the platform and the community. So that piece about I'm surrounded by other people. I'm not alone. I'm not the only one struggling with this. That I can now, it's deepened my understandings of my feelings, emotional intelligence, all those human skills. I'm sick to death of people talking about soft skills. They're just human skills. And you can see finally, sleep and anxiety. So I think with that, I am bang on time. And I'll try have a look in the comment section for any questions.